Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was standing just beyond the reach of the flashlight watching me. My father built it in the late 70s with his brothers deep in the Tennessee woods beside Blackwater Lake, long before GPS or paved roads reached that area. It sat alone among thick pine and crooked oak trees, hidden behind miles of gravel roads and dense forest. During the day, it was beautiful. Quiet water, clean air, fish jumping near the reeds. I loved the place. At 34 years old, burned out from overtime shifts and constant noise, I needed a weekend alone more than I needed sleep. My parents hadn't visited the cabin in years, so when I asked my father for the key, he handed it to me, almost reluctantly. "You staying the whole weekend?" he asked. "That's the plan." He nodded slowly, staring down at the old brass key in my palm. "Don't go wandering around outside at night." I laughed a little. What am I, 12? But he didn't smile back. "Animals, you know." "Yeah, okay," I said as I got in my truck and headed north. The first day was perfect. Bright blue skies, cool breeze, the smell of pine sap and lake water drifting through the open windows. By noon, I had a line in the water and a beer beside me on the dock. I spent hours fishing in total silence, except for insects buzzing in the trees and the occasional splash of bass near the shoreline. That first night was peaceful too. I grilled on the porch, listened to the radio, and fell asleep in the recliner with the wind brushing softly against the cabin walls. Saturday morning started the same way. Sunshine, warm air, still water. I remember standing on the dock with coffee in my hand, thinking the weather report had been dead accurate for once. There wasn't a cloud in sight. Then, around noon, everything changed. Clouds rolled over the woods. Thick black storm clouds swallowed the sky in less than an hour. The wind picked up hard enough to bend the pine trees sideways, and the lake transformed from glassy calm into violent dark water. I retreated to the cabin to wait out the rain, hoping it would pass quickly. But by 3 o'clock, rain hammered the roof. By evening, thunder shook the entire cabin. By dusk, I figured I might as well settle in and try to enjoy it. Storms felt cozy out there, isolated, primitive. I lit lanterns because the power flickered constantly, cooked canned soup on the stove, and sat near the window, watching lightning tear across the sky. The woods looked unfamiliar whenever the lightning flashed. The tree branches twisted into shapes that looked almost human for a split second, before darkness swallowed them again. Around 10 that night, I heard the first child's voice. I froze. It sounded distant. It was calling for help. I waited, not knowing at first if I was just hearing things. The storm roared against the cabin while thunder rattled the windows. I told myself it had been the wind, or maybe some strange echo bouncing across the lake. Then I heard it again. A child's voice called out through the storm. "Help us." Closer this time, high-pitched, almost breathless. The voice sounded young, maybe 8 or 9 years old. Another voice joined it. "Please." I stood slowly and turned down the radio. The cabin became painfully quiet, except for rain drumming on the roof. Then, 2 children laughing together. I stared toward the front door. Every muscle in my body tightened. I moved to the window beside the door and peered outside. Nothing but darkness and heavy rain. The porch light illuminated sheets of water crashing sideways through the wind, but beyond that there was only forest. "Hello?" I shouted. No answer. Then came another laugh, right outside the cabin. I jerked backward hard enough to knock over the chair behind me. The sound had come from directly beside the porch. I grabbed the flashlight near the door and stepped outside. Rain instantly soaked my clothes. The beam of the flashlight cut across the porch, the muddy yard, the tree line. Nothing. No children, no movement. But something felt off. The storm muffled everything except the rain, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was standing just beyond the reach of the flashlight watching me. Then I heard footsteps, splashing through mud somewhere near the trees. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing there. The footsteps stopped immediately. "Hey!" I shouted. "Who's out there?" Only thunder answered. I stayed outside another minute before going back in and locking the door. My hands were shaking harder than I wanted to admit. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe kids from another cabin nearby. Maybe drunk teenagers messing around in the storm. But deep down, I knew something didn't fit. There weren't any nearby cabins for miles. Around midnight, the power finally died completely. The cabin plunged into darkness. I lit 2 lanterns and sat at the kitchen table listening to rain and thunder while trying not to think about the voices. That's when the knocking started. 3 slow knocks against the front wall. Not the door. The wall. I looked up. Another 3 knocks, like someone tapping directly against the logs from outside. Then the knocks moved. 3 knocks against the side of the cabin, then another set from the back, circling. My chest tightened. I grabbed the flashlight again and checked every window one by one. Nothing outside, no silhouettes, no people. But while looking out the back window, I noticed something near the woods. Tiny lights. At first I thought they were reflections from lightning. Then they blinked. 3 small pale lights hovering between the trees, not floating, standing at different heights, like people holding flashlights or lanterns. I squinted through the rain. The lights vanished. A second later, thunder exploded overhead so loudly the cabin shook. Then came the laughter again, this time directly underneath the window. I stumbled backward so fast I nearly fell. Children giggling, whispering. Wet hands suddenly slapped against the window. I heard splashing footsteps circling the cabin at full speed. Not one child, several, laughing hysterically. The sound moved impossibly fast. They circled the cabin over and over while tiny hands smacked against the walls and windows. I shouted for them to leave. I warned them that I had a gun. The laughter only grew louder. Then it stopped all at once. Complete silence. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. Even the storm seemed quieter for a moment. That silence scared me worse than the noises. I stood frozen in the center of the cabin, listening to my own breathing. And then I heard a voice from behind me. A little girl whispering softly. I turned, but the hallway was empty. The guest bedroom door slowly creaked open by itself. I stared at it for several seconds, unable to move. I forced myself forward. Each floorboard creaked loudly beneath my feet. I reached the doorway and shined the light around the room. Nothing. Just old furniture covered with sheets. Then I noticed the floor. Wet footprints. Tiny muddy footprints crossing the wooden floorboards. The prints looked fresh. They led from the closet to the bed and disappeared. I backed out of the room immediately and slammed the door shut. I wanted to get out of there, but the storm outside had become violent enough that driving those narrow dirt roads in the dark would have been impossible. So I stayed. Around 1 a.m, something began walking on the roof. Slow dragging footsteps overhead, back and forth. Whatever was up there was heavy enough to cause the ceiling to bow with each step. No animal I'd ever heard sounded like that. I sat gripping my shotgun while staring upward. The footsteps stopped directly above me. Then came a scratching sound, like long fingernails dragging slowly across the roof. Over and over. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Then something slammed onto the porch outside, hard enough to rattle the windows. I jumped violently. A second later came another slam, then another, like bodies dropping from the roof onto the porch one after another. The laughter returned instantly. Louder now, excited. Children laughing while running across the porch outside. Then the front doorknob slowly began to turn. I stared at it in disbelief. The knob twisted left, stopped, twisted again harder. The old wood creaked softly. Something outside was trying to come in. I approached the door carefully and looked through the small window beside it. At first, I saw only rain. Then lightning flashed, and for one brief second, I saw them standing in the yard, 3 children. They stood motionless near the tree line, staring directly at the cabin. Darkness swallowed them again. Then came a soft knock. A little girl's voice spoke through the storm. "Please let us in." I didn't answer. Another knock. "We're cold." I backed away from the door until my shoulders hit the kitchen counter. The voice changed.
"We're cold."
Then something hit the front door so hard the entire frame shook. Another slam followed, then another. The children began laughing wildly outside while pounding against the cabin walls from every direction. Windows rattled violently. Tiny shadows darted past the glass. The lantern flames flickered hard. I honestly thought the cabin might collapse, and then everything stopped instantly. The storm continued outside, but all the banging and laughter vanished. I sat there trembling for what felt like forever. Eventually, exhaustion took over. I woke suddenly to silence. No thunder, no rain. Gray morning light filtered through the windows. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it had all been a nightmare. Then I looked toward the front door. Mud covered the wood. Tiny handprints, dozens of them. The windows were streaked with small, muddy fingerprints from the outside. I grabbed my truck keys and left everything else behind. Fishing poles, cooler, food, clothes, all of it. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed something hanging from the railing. A small, faded bracelet made of woven string and tiny white beads, child-sized, dripping wet. The woods were completely still as I hurried toward my truck. It felt like the entire forest was watching me leave. As I backed down the dirt road, I looked once toward the cabin and saw 3 small figures standing motionless on the porch, watching me. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor and never looked back again. When I got home, I told my father everything, every sound, every voice, every footprint. He listened without interrupting once. When I finished, he sat silently for a long time, staring at the floor. Finally, he said something that still keeps me awake at night. "When I was a boy," he whispered, 3 children drowned in that lake during a storm, and their bodies were never recovered." He handed me an old black and white photo. One of those kids was my sister. This is the last picture we made with all of us together. As I looked at the young girl in the photo, I noticed the bracelet she was wearing. It was made of woven string with small white beads.